call to order the Wednesday, December 12, 2018 meeting of the Southborough School Committee. First order of business is audience sharing. Anyone have anything to share? All right, we'll move into new business and the English language education update. Rhoda Webb with us.
Rhoda, our annual presentation, English language learners.
That's right. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to give you an update of our current situation. The information was frozen in November. So just as a reminder, our English learner is a student whose first language is not English and is not able to perform ordinary classwork in English. That is the state definition. When a family joins our district, we spend a lot of time getting to know the family because we have so many different languages and cultures. And our families know their child the best, of course, so that we find out the use of languages in the home, ask the parents to tell us a bit more about their culture, how languages are used, when the child was exposed to English, if that is the situation, strengths that the student has, possible challenges, mobility, educational background of the family. In other words, we get to know our families really well. Every child is tested for language proficiency to ensure that the child can access the academic levels in our classrooms. If you look at the first graph, this shows the trend analysis over the years. And at this point, we have 90 English learners in our district with 46 students who have been reclassified, and we have to monitor by state guidelines every English learner for 4 years. And this will give us a total of 136 students in all, since we have to actively be engaged with all students. If you look at the second graph, that will tell us about the languages that we currently have in our district, both our English learners and our former English learners. So we have increased a few languages this year and the amount of speakers of those languages. What is interesting to note also is in preschool, out of 54 Southborough students in our preschool, 24 students have a language besides English or in addition to English in the home, for a total of 13 languages. So as you can see, we have families coming to us from all over the world. Chinese continues to be the majority language, followed by Portuguese and Russian, and then a total of 25 languages all in all. If we look at the third graph, you will see the language proficiency levels of our students in the fall, and we have 26% at the foundational level. That is students that are able to, in the four language domains, are communicating at a simple sentence level, and at the transitional level is now when starting at that simple sentence level all the way to be able to be reading and writing in complex compound sentences. Of course, we have highly skilled teachers who are working with our English learners, and in our district, the programming that we have is called Structured English Immersion, which consists of two parts. English language development, which is a requirement for our English learners to receive, taught by licensed ESL teachers. And we're very fortunate to have very skilled teachers in our district. And the other component is structured content instruction, who are our SEI trained teachers. That means that for core academic teachers in Massachusetts, our teachers need to have an SEI endorsement. And to date in Southborough, we have 95 classroom and subject teachers who are SEI endorsed. In the early fall, I was able to report that we have a summer program for our teachers. From the very beginning that we have started looking at the amount of students that we have in our district, we have worked in a very comprehensive way. So there's a lot of collaboration among all administrators, special education, and all fields. And in the realm of special education, of course, we have put a lot of work into being able to understand what is second language acquisition or bilingualism and what is a disability. And so we continue to work very closely with our special education administrators and all our teams because that is definitely an essential understanding and expertise to be able to have in our district, which we do have, I'm happy to say. Another thing to bear in mind is that when we come back from vacation, our students will be taking the Access 2.0. This year, grades 1 through 8 will be taking an online component. Grades 1 and 3 will do writing, pencil, and paper. And that will give us a yearly measure of how the students have done compared to last January. And of course, we are able to report progress of each student over the months in every school year. That is just one measure that we look at. And our students, grades 3 and up, also have to take MCAS. The other thing that to give you an update about is the seal of biliteracy. The state has not yet come out with a guidance, but in 8th grade this year, we will be administrating a language proficiency assessment, which will give us the 4 language domains of our students taking a world language, and that will give a nice data baseline for our students moving into Algonquin. And as we implement that in the years ahead at Algonquin, we'll be able to look at the students' progress as well. So thank you for the opportunity to give you an update tonight. And it's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Rhoda. Questions? I just have one about the SEI endorsement. Is that
Yes.
a fairly recent requirement that they...
No, we've been doing it for the last, let's see, for Southborough it was in 2013, I believe, when the initiative was started. And
I
we
consider that recent.
started, it's more recent compared to other things, but we've been working on it for a very long time, informing our teachers who are considered core academic teachers to be getting the endorsement. And so this is ongoing since it's part of licensure.
So what's your assessment of what difference that's made?
So if strategies are applied, and especially helpful for students that are at the level 3 and up, not for the foundational level, because the students need more intensive language acquisition. If the strategy is applied in a classroom, it definitely helps our students learn content.
We have 95 who got that endorsement?
Yes,
Is that a requirement now?
it is a requirement for core academic teachers, yes.
Rhoda, it's probably appropriate to say it was like Prince, formerly known as Retail. So
Right.
many of the conversations we had when it first was launched was about
Right.
rethinking teacher equity and English language learners.
Right.
Just when you learn what the acronym is, they changed the rules. I think that's where it first
Yes, it's part of the
originated.
retail initiative, yes.
Okay.
We talked a lot about that under that terminology at the time.
So on this, the frequency chart, which
Yes.
identifies, and maybe you mentioned it, but what is this, what's the adjustment for households multiple languages kind of signify? It's like
Because, yes, in some households there's more than one language, so we adjust according to the amount of students.
So-
And just the total amount of students who are speaking other languages.
So up above, because you had a household with more than one language, 2, I guess.
Exactly.
It's shown twice.
That's right.
In 2 places up
That's right.
above, but the actual total.
That's right.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yes. Thank you, Rhoda. Appreciate you coming. We have the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education Program Review overview.
Let me turn this over to Assistant Superintendent Martineau, who's spearheaded this exciting opportunity to have Desi visit.
So the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is required to review 40 districts annually across the Commonwealth. These are random reviews. The public schools of Northborough and Southborough was selected as a school district, so I think it was a 3-for-1, 3 districts counted toward the 40. So we were randomly selected. The review consists of a self-assessment, and basically we asked our curriculum leaders, our educators to participate in a self-assessment. We submitted that to the review team. They also require a document review, so actually this Friday we'll be submitting a document review, and then there'll be an on-site visit on January 7th, 8th, and 9th. A team will visit and interview key stakeholders, principals, school committee members, educators, parents, and basically from that review, the self-assessment, and the visiting committee, they'll generate a report that will be provided to us for review. The timing is actually great. It's different than the coordinated program review in the sense that that's a compliance audit. This is more of a programmatic review. They're making recommendations of how we can improve our program. The recommendations aren't necessarily need to be implemented. They're for us to take in and think about how to best move forward our program. The timing is actually excellent in terms of our strategic plan sunsetting to 2020. So this is another layer of data that we can add to the work as we reauthorize our strategic plan moving forward. So again, we're looking forward to the feedback and input from this review team, and more information will follow in the next week. And we're looking forward to the team visiting and getting some data out of the districts.
Go ahead.
When was the last, have we gone through this before? And if so, when was the last one?
So it used to be the program of quality assurance, so it's changed. I think it's been
2005,
it's been
8.
more than a decade, and so it's been some time. And the districts being reviewed are in the back of the letter this year, so
That's well shy of 40 now.
well shy of 40.
Yeah.
There are more than this. When we captured this, we actually took it off the listserv that was going through the Superintendent's Association, because we've been sharing information about the reviews. A lot of the reviews have taken place in October. So it's been interesting to get perspective on the experience. So there have been additional ones, and as this gets closer, I think we'll have a more comprehensive list. Department of Ed did not necessarily provide us with this list, but we sort of found out who's going through the process just by looking at the listserv of superintendents, because they've been all sending out, communications about questions that have come up or the preparation of documents. And it's been an interesting observation process, given that we haven't had our visit yet, and quite informative.
So maybe I'm not quite understanding, but so they're reviewing, they're identifying our systems, policies, practices, to focus on ways in which we work to improve and promote equity for underserved groups of students, correct? Is that
Correct.
So I'm just curious, a couple examples of groups, some underserved students, or some groups of students that are defined as underserved in the district?
So there are 6 standards that they'll be reviewing when they visit. So it's leadership and governance, curriculum, instruction, assessment, HR and PD, student support services, finances, and assets. So through that review, they'll be looking at potentially maybe economically disadvantaged students in that subgroup and how we're serving those students in terms of resource allocation, curriculum development, and teacher to student ratios as an example. Special education might be another subgroup that they look at in terms of the students who are not achieving at the same level as their typical peers, where there's an achievement gap.
How do they define, well, do we know how they define underserved? I mean, I know they're
I think they define it as the subgroups
Okay.
and the achievement gap.
So the subgroups kind of fit into that, I'll call it characteristic, not necessarily, okay, I sort of get it. Thank you.
Yes. All right, moving on to the communication system update.
We are fortunate to have with us tonight TJ Karen, who is Assistant Director of Technology. TJ, along with Andy Mariotti, really spearheaded the very successful initiative this summer, where we upgraded all of our phones, in all of our schools. And that work continues by upgrading other aspects of the phone system, not the tangible phone, but maybe the infrastructure. So suggested that TJ may want to join us tonight and just give us an update.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me tonight. I'm excited to be here and share a lot of the great work that's been going on in the district this past year. As Christine mentioned, one of our major projects was updating the infrastructure. And the infrastructure serves two purposes. The first purpose is to support the work that the teachers do in the 21st century classroom, as we say, supporting the technology, the Chromebooks and iPads that they're using. And it also supports now phone systems through VoIP technology. So the process for the infrastructure updates began about a year or two ago. There's this great federal program called E-rate that we filed for as a way to get some money back on these investments that we were making. So through that E-rate program, we were approved a certain subset of money that they would help contribute to these updates, and we were able to execute on those and make infrastructure updates to all the Southborough schools. Once that was completed, we went through the process of upgrading this phone system, going through an RFP process, making sure that we were getting the best deal possible with the best service. And with this phone system, as I mentioned, being VoIP, rather than a traditional analog system that's not integrated with the network, this system is integrated. So it runs over the same wires that drive all of our instructional tools. So it was great that we were able to leverage E-rate to get some money back on that and to support those different systems. I want to thank Galen Hammond and John Wigan, who are two of the technology specialists in the Southborough district. They were a big part of making this happen over the summer, in addition to all the work that they did, making sure that we were able to work with this vendor and have the system implemented successfully before the start of school. This project with communication is ongoing. We're in the process of updating our phone lines to a PRI system. The PRI adds a lot of feature sets to the VoIP system in terms of security, quality, consistency, things like that. So it will allow us to better utilize this new system that we've invested in and keep moving forward.
When you say infrastructure upgrades, can you go into a little more detail on what
Yes.
exactly?
So the infrastructure updates, as it pertains to the phone piece, is switching. So that's all where desktops, laptops, different things are plugged in directly to the network, and as well as the phone stack. So, and as a part of that as well, less so with the phones, wireless access points are also eligible under the E-rate program. So that's something that we also each year review our needs, making sure that we're leveraging the latest wireless standards that come out intermittently each year.
So are these, I guess I'll call it the handsets, the phones themselves, are they Ethernet connected or wireless connected?
They're connected through Ethernet.
Okay.
They use power over Ethernet, so
Got it.
it's one wire that serves data and power.
Now, was there a lot of new wiring that was required, or do these things sometimes just do a pass-through where you can pass through to another device on the network?
That's actually a great question, because it's something that we had to review in detail.
I only ask one great question every year. I'm really lucky you were here.
So wiring was a very important topic as we were reviewing this project, because if you don't have at least Cat 5
Right.
standard, it won't properly power and use the phone, basically. So fortunately, in Southborough, all of our connections back to the phones were Cat 5, so we didn't have to make further investment there. They do have solutions for powering over Cat 3, but it's not ideal.
Got it.
So we were able to save some money there since the wiring was good. And the phones, fortunately, have a pass-through connection, so if you had another device there, you could tag it into it. But fortunately, for the most part, we had, since more and more student devices are wireless now, we had an abundance of drops that we could use at each location.
Thank you.
So what kind of bandwidth do we have now, for, say, on the wireless network?
And the wireless or just the internet connection in general?
Both.
Both. The internet connection throughout Southborough is Verizon 5s. So we have fiber internet, which is very consistent, high quality. We have, I believe it's 300 megs at the elementary schools and then 500 megs at the middle schools. So we have a very strong connection, very fast connection. In terms of the wireless, most of our schools, we're running on 802 AC. They have a new standard coming out, I believe it's AX, that we're looking to invest in through these next few years, just to increase the data speed to each device. And in terms of what speed we're getting to the device, it typically depends if the card supports 5 gigahertz or that AC standard, so it will vary from device to device.
So is our bandwidth from FiOS friends, and they tout is it equal upload and download, or I mean, that's
Yeah,
what, okay, so that's,
they call that symmetrical speed.
okay.
Yes,
So
so
that's what
with
they're providing?
FiOS, yeah, that's sort of the difference between a traditional coaxial connection through
Right.
a charter, where you would get 100 down and then 7 up. Fortunately, ours is symmetrical, so it's we don't typically use the upload as much, but we have it, which is great.
Yeah, I wouldn't think we would necessarily use it upload as much, but that's still nice.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
TJ usually comes to our meetings with a translation guide for actually following along with the last 10 minutes, so it's helpful.
I was just reading these, I didn't understand what I was asking, actually. I was somebody gave me these questions.
Thank you very much.
So these phones will work in the rain now? So.
And the lines, right? Isn't that one of the big
Yes.
reasons?
So the
for
rain
upgrading?
is
Yeah.
the big reason that we're looking at these new phone lines with this PRI. So that will help alleviate some of those challenges, because that wasn't a product of the phone system, it was a product of the carrier side. So that's something that we're looking forward to solving very soon with this PRI.
So the phones don't run over the internet connection, the FiOS internet connection?
The existing carrier service that we have is POTS line, which is copper. So that was separate from the data connection, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
Yeah, what we're looking for, as I said, the PRI will resolve these issues, so looking forward to it.
Okay.
And TJ, am I correct that some of the other upgrades that we're planning to make with respect to safety and security are tied to the fact that we've done and have had significant upgrades as part of the phone line installation and the phones? So that will make some of the other things that we've talked about much more readily accessible to implement this year.
Absolutely.
And I know that's the next phase.
Mhm.
All of that has led into a successful launch of a lot of different things, including the phone system. I just have to commend the tech team again. The work over the summer was unbelievably quick, efficient, joyful, as we ran into on a regular day. Technicians were happy campers who were pleased to be in our schools. The principals were on site, and it was just probably the best implementation we've had.
Very
in
much
some time.
a team effort through all departments. We were able to come together, and the big thing was making sure the phones worked for the first day of school. And we were able to do that, and they've been working since.
And that has given TJ a new title. We call TJ Buddha Tech around the office.
So, joyful is such an
Buddha.
unexpected word to use in describing a technology update. Is that a seasonal thing that's going
Well,
on here?
it can
or
be
is it-
seasonal, but it can also be related to unsuccessful implementations
Okay.
along the way. So this one was just a lot of smiles. It could be a seasonal event too. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, TJ.
Thank you.
Joyful is relative.
Prasad, yeah,
Yeah.
understood. Understood.
On to the superintendent's report committee, beginning with enrollments.
Enrollments are in your packet. It's always interesting to flip the first page and see how stable our enrollment and our population is through the year. It is something that we enjoy in our district. There's great consistency of folks who are in our classrooms each and every day, which also helps for the educational experience of everyone, because there's not a lot of transitioning that happens throughout the year. And so to have only a 5 student variance in our enrollment numbers from the beginning of the year is something to celebrate as well. In addition to this, you have our projections. Our numbers are fairly constant, which has resulted in no staffing changes proposed in next year's budget. Our class sizes are very healthy, and that's a positive note in terms of where we are with our class sizes and our enrollment projections for next year. And as always, Clayton and I have talked a little bit, chatted about our kindergarten enrollments, and we're expecting 140, right? That's the standard number. I know. Yeah. That's a going number, I think, that we've used over the years. But we're pleased to see that, we still have a healthy K population students enrolling in our system. And as always, that will change throughout next year. And certainly as of the first day of school in August. Also in the packet, we are looking at the completion of the November budgeting process, or the month of November, and we have the expenditure report before you for a vote to approve until audited.
So I move that we approve the Southborough fiscal year 2019 budget monthly general fund expenditure report as of November 30th, 2018 until audited.
I'll second that.
By Rogers, second by Katora. Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous.
As a distribution only, the FY20 budget priorities, I'm pleased to share that these budget priorities are very much reflected in our FY20 budget, which we'll visit in a moment. And these were voted and approved by school committee on the 10th of October.
Okay.
Also in the packet, a very much abbreviated budget calendar. Usually we're looking at 2 pages, but because of the change in the budget process this year, this probably will be it for the year. One addition, Greg just mentioned that DESI will be here 7th, 8th, and 9th, we think, and they have quite an extensive interview schedule. We also have received notification from town manager, town administrator, that financial advisory is planning to start its conversations with the various town budgets January 9th. So obviously, if we have a choice of extending that or having an earlier meeting with them, not to have DESI on site while we're planning our presentation for financial advisory would be helpful. So I will be chatting with Mark Purple to see what we can do to either be the last department to present, or if they're going to do this, have their meetings a little bit earlier, like January 6th or something, but to try to stay away from that window so that we're not having to rush from a very extensive interview off to financial advisory, because we're not sure when they're going to start, and I think we have a 4:30 or 5 o'clock with DESI then. So also worth noting, the town meeting is March 23rd. With that in mind, we do have some flexibility with the public hearing. The public hearing has to be held within 60 days of town meeting. Depending on whether we vote this evening, which would be my request, we could hold the public hearing in February, which would probably be the best time to do it rather than the March meeting, giving enough time for feedback if necessary, but certainly having that take place and putting that to rest as we move forward to the budget process. The capital plan, we did vote and approve this last month. There was a great suggestion from, I believe, Jessica Devine, that we make note that the track resurfacing was submitted and approved at town meeting, and it's so noted with a typo in the corner, so we'll be fixing the typo and bringing it back, but that change has been made. There's a G, I think, instead of an H. But this is for review. Paula, it might be appropriate to give a little bit of an update on this morning's meeting, since we're having a conversation about capital plan.
Sure.
If you want me to move forward.
Please.
So we had a solar feasibility study working group meeting this morning, which was incredibly productive. And Mr. Desmond was present, and John Parent from Southborough Town was also present. And we have launched the RFP process. And one of the, I think, reasons for that launch is we finally gathered, and Ty and Bond was also at the table with us, the original consultants that we had hired, and with some starts and stops for various reasons and continual changes in terms of how solar is looked upon by the federal government and the state. We've centered around a new timeline for the process, which brings us to the selection of potential bidders in June. We've had various approaches to the RFP process, including a Plan A, which would be solar roof mounts, Plan B, which would be canopy mounts, and really just made every potential facility available for the bidding process. We are writing that RFP, Ty and Bond is writing that RFP in a way that would provide us with maximum opportunities to accept, decline, or reject, just with changes, any of the proposals that they may come forward with. So it's very exciting, and particularly in relationship to the capital plan, we know that the roof estimates were much higher than what we've been carrying in the capital plan for some time, so great work by Brian Fantoni getting those roof estimates in. But the RFP is going forward. First wish is for the roofs to be replaced. And it is a collaborative effort with Northborough and the region, so that we look as attractive as we can be bidders, because there are more sites to be considered. And again, the first option is for roofs to be replaced by the selected vendor, and then engage in a lease agreement. So much more to come, but very exciting meeting.
So basically, it's a way to get the roofs replaced.
For free.
Without money
Right.
out of pocket. Plus, not free electricity, but we sell the electricity back under the lease agreement, and it's offsets what we use.
Yay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll be very much looking forward to seeing what comes our way, and I think Ty and Bond was pretty pleased that we're just making that commitment of all in and moving forward with it. I can't believe where I'm saying the recommended budget in December. First, I want to thank all of the administrators for sort of the team collaboration in building this year's budget. I had mentioned that we had changed the process a little bit and built in some efficiencies, and I think from the feedback, it was well received. And we were able to move this process along. So last month, I did present the preliminary budget, and at that time, it was a 3.17% increase. Since we last met, we did have an all-in town department meeting with town administrator, and I believe there were some conversations at the Board of Selectmen about a percentage that the town was looking for in terms of an all-in percent increase for the town. So what you see this evening is a recommended budget that reflects the ongoing conversations working in collaboration with the town. I'm pleased to report that because of our shifts in out-of-district placements, in part because of our student population, but also because of the great work of our special ed department, and also what takes place on a daily basis in our schools supporting our students. Some of our anticipated out-of-district placements remain in district. And so that's helped us bring in a budget that is definitely favorable for the town, but moreover supports, for the most part, every request that the administrators, with some slight variations, put in the budget for FY20 and really meet the needs as articulated in our budget priorities. So I do have a PowerPoint that I can move through if that is the wish of the committee. The handout is in front of you. There were some slight changes. I can walk through this fairly quickly.
That's fine with me.
So our funding priorities, this budget does capture, the goals of our strategic plan in all of the 4 focus areas. We are continuing to present a technology budget that allows us to maintain our 1-to-1 student-to-device ratio, reliable devices. We started this process about 6 years ago, making sure that we had a replacement and replenishment cycle of technology. This budget continues to reflect that. We heard TJ mention that the infrastructure upgrades have taken place, which will support that increased 1-to-1 relationship of student to device in the classroom setting. We have absolutely made some significant capital investments in our building and building systems, and we'll continue to do that this year. Of course, the Woodward driveway upgrade that's scheduled for June, but moreover, because of the budget and the revolving facilities rental account, we will be doing some security upgrades as well, starting in March, once we have expended more of the operational budget. So great work. We've had some replacement of furniture. I think Keith has put in for some additional furniture upgrades this year. We've had significant upgrades at Neary, so we've done some great projects around the district and at all of our schools. We continue to invest in a professional development model that supports student and teacher learning, and we have in this budget moved to a tuition-free kindergarten model as of September, August next year. So just great work all around for those mini conversations about a transition model that was educationally sound and fiscally responsible. So with all of that said, we are still putting forth a budget that supports, again, our priorities and the needs of the town. So as we move through, we are completely aligned with our class size policy. We have maintained all the programs that we have in place with some incremental growth in line items. I'm pleased to say that, I shouldn't say I'm pleased to say that the principal submitted some increases in all the line items, but they have, and they've done that to support expanded resources in the classroom. And with minor exceptions, they're all in as requested. We do have the opportunity to access some additional funds where reductions needed to be made, slight reductions through some of our revolving accounts. So basically, as represented, we're whole in terms of requests. Safe school readiness, we just mentioned a few of the upgrades, but have had made significant upgrades with our safety protocols and with the telecommunications system upgrades, made a giant leap forward. This budget reflects our overarching goal of trying to transition key positions off of grant funding. Just alone this year, we lost the funding from our nursing grant that has sunset, and the new sort of authorization of this grant does not support any items that were previously supported in the grant. It's about innovative practices. It's about connectivity with other districts, and because of that, we had a slight increase in some of our line items to absorb the costs of the grant funding, the absence of grant funding in the budget. Specifically, we have float nurses. We have to have a nurse in each of our schools, and so the grant did support the cost of those substitute nurses, as well as having nurses participate in field trips, which is important to make sure that our students are well cared for medically while on a field trip. So we were able to absorb those in this budget as well. Moving forward, we continue to maximize the revenue that we receive. from our rental income and use that to offset capital expenditures. And on the next page, you'll see, the next slide, we do talk about the essential school, the elimination of the essential school health grant. As usual, in a budget cycle, the biggest budget, the financial factor was the Kohler and Stepson Lanes increase. This year, we had a total increase alone in that one item of $708,169. We had slight uptick in student transportation costs, a 1.5% on our overall bus contract, but a slight increase in our special ed transportation costs. We were able, as I mentioned earlier, with great work by Clayton and Jennifer Henrys, the preschool coordinator, to enhance our preschool offerings for students, which resulted in an increase in revenue because of the full-day tuition charge. We had, again, this is a nod to all of the members of the school committee who over the last many years wrote letters to the legislative representatives asking for returning circuit breaker to somewhere around 70%. We were at 65 to 68% in the last several years. So we received some additional circuit breaker revenue, which allowed us then to absorb some of those costs and still come in range in this budget. And we did have reduced tuition, both at our collaborative, which is Assabet Valley Collaborative, and also out of district. So it's noteworthy that this budget has a recommended increase of $529,212, and our contracted costs alone were over $700,000. So that meant somewhere we had to find some offsets. We were able to do that in the line items and still support the work, the requests of our administrative team and meet the needs of our student population. Just a snapshot, which is always a little fun to see where the money is funded. On slide 9, there is a distribution of the FY20 recommended budget by fund code categories. Again, noteworthy, contractual obligations of our total budget is in excess of 84% of the overall budget. The last slide, or the slide beneath that, shows the overall contractual increases exceeded the overall budget increase, resulting in net offsets. And so that's just a real brief snapshot of showing you basically what the increase looked like and what the contractual increases were. And the last slide is just a brief non-fund code related snapshot of the budget. Contractual increases, steps and lane changes, 84.33%. All other line items is that yellow slice at 15.67. So this evening, I would like to recommend to the school committee a vote, to entertain a vote to accept the recommended budget for FY 2020, $20,935,198, representing an incremental increase over the FY19 budget, $529,212, for an overall percent increase of 2.59%.
If we make this motion and second, then we discuss it? Is that, can we do that? And so why don't I go ahead and move that we accept the 2020 budget of $20,935,198, which represents an incremental increase of $529,212, which is an increase of 2.59%.
I'll second.
Moved by Rogers, seconded by Couture.
Discussion?
Discussion.
I have a question about the health grant. So I know that you said we're shifting that off because the focus has shifted. Are we also going to be applying for that grant money in other ways for the innovative practices and those kind of things?
So that's a great question. The nurses asked actually to meet with me along with Lori Pardee, who retired, but technically retired, but back in the district until we fill that position. And there is a description also handed out this evening of the redesigned district health and wellness coordinator position, as we had actually spoken about earlier in the meetings. So because of the language, and they did not release the details of the grant application process until November. So several of the nurses in Lori attended that session. And it was basically unanimously agreed upon by the nurses and Lori, who certainly has been involved in the grant since it was authorized some time ago, that the way that the language is worded would take far greater work for very little, if any, return. So we're waiting for the grant to be sort of well vetted through this initial process. What they were actually requesting to fulfill the new guidelines is beyond the scope of what a singular district or even a multi-district like ours could fulfill, and really looking for large-scale new programs that really form somewhat of a collaborative mindset to meet these needs. And the amount of funding was still in question, and they just felt at this point, because of the status of the grant language, it's not even really a reauthorization, it's a complete change of grant language, that it did not provide much benefit for us. The only thing that I could think about when they were talking about this grant was when the ARA grants were authorized about 12 years ago, 10 years ago. And a lot of districts declined to participate simply because the return on investment in time was not significant, if at all, present. But we're keeping a watchful eye over it. There's some question about whether or not the monies that have been set aside to fund this new initiative, because basically that's what it is. It's a singular purposeful event in the grant submission. If there's additional funds that have not been awarded, there is a possibility that there's a second phase of this grant that will be reauthorized. So we're keeping a watch on that as well. I would say that the district wellness coordinator position was not impacted because that was not necessarily funded by the grant itself. So that remains in the budget shared by 3 districts. So it was, really substitute coverage in the grant, but important to have in the grant, in our budget. Did that?
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Special ed question. But let me start with kudos to the district for being able to provide sufficient in-district support for special ed students in a way that enables us to reduce that tuition out of district placement cost. Well, most importantly, though, I'm a firm believer that if you can provide the sufficient resources in district, the student, I won't say universally, but is generally better off in that environment than in a situation where they have to go out of district. That said, do we know about how much that saved from last year's budget? And if I don't necessarily think you have to have it off the top of your head, but do we have it?
So I have a few examples, and this has been something we've often wondered. A couple of years ago, we started 2 new programs. One we cost share with Northborough, and it's the therapeutic learning program, the TLP program. And most recently, there was a BSE hearing, which is you go before the Board of Education to determine whether the placement is appropriate or not appropriate for a child. And in this case, it was clearly communicated to us that it was because we had created one of these programs, and it's a viable program. The student was not to be outplaced, that we could service the child in-house.
Yeah, that's great.
And some of, a placement can run anywhere from, 60,000 to 300,000. And so that's something very tangible that I think Marie and 2 assistant directors were skipping through the door at that point. You can't believe this is a great example. But on a day-to-day basis, it's the, it is the supports that we provide in our schools that allow our students to be present. The fact that we cost share and still have, NEC programs in our schools makes it far more attractive for parents to want to keep their children here because they're close to home and heart. And also the work we do with the Assabet Valley Collaborative. There are a lot of amazing shared collaborative programs that are run where we're able to place our students locally. And any opportunity that we have to build and bring in those programs, we entertain the possibility because it does, save money on the budget, but more importantly, provide quality service for our students in our communities, which is what we ideally want.
Well, let me,
So the budget, in fact, can be the ability to carry forward any savings in one fiscal year to the next, which are allowed by law for special ed services. So when that happens, it does allow us to realize some cost savings in the next year, in the next year's budgeting process. Much like circuit breaker, we're allowed to move those money forward or retain those funds in district for a year. And so that is an accumulative saving as well that helps in any fiscal year. And we were able to do some of that here.
okay, so it sounds like trying to get a specific decrease from last year isn't necessarily.
I would say it was in excess of 150,000.
Okay, so well, and again, I say it's great that we're being able to provide more, in-district facilities and capabilities. That really is great. So I'm concerned when I see that our contractual increases are so much more than our budget increase, because I worry that, the dollars we're cutting, now special ed's certainly, that wouldn't be an example because that's a good thing, right? But the dollars we're cutting are coming from, the principals trying to, fund things. So obviously you've gone through this enough so that but it's a little scary, but I guess it's a combination of congratulations and it's still a little scary. It's impressive.
Can I comment on that?
Please.
I'm actually thrilled with this year's budget because I think it's the first one we haven't actually gone back to the principals and said, you need to trim in certain areas. I think because we're able to realize cost savings, in every year is different. It's a different scenario every year. Next year we could have increased special education costs simply because of, the population. But we're fairly proactive in identifying the needs of students. And over a period of time, we've really built up our supports in our schools to be able to either develop new programs or simply provide those services for students. It's an ongoing conversation. But now you're going to be chatting, I think, Friday about what can we do to provide some services for students that are at Finn at this point in time, and it changes. But one of the things that I feel good about this budget is we have realized savings because of the strategic programming we've put in place, and this year we're able to do the kinds of things that the principals have requested, the programs that we've been able to support over time, that we've built up, and still realize those cost benefits. Southborough is very unique, and it's interesting that Sam just walked through the door, because one of the things we've always talked about is how can we do a better job at predicting what those contractual increases are going to be from year to year. And Southborough is in a very unique situation where the percent of increase on contractual increases is very close to the contractual increase, because the steps in lanes that are occurring in other districts are not drastic in Southborough, because a lot of our teachers are in the corner pocket on the salary grid. So if we
At
look
this particular point in time.
at this particular point, and it looks like because we usually look to retirements for offsets or transitions, and we have none, maybe one this year. With the population we have is pretty amazing. And it looks like there's going to be that sustainability factor in percentage increases, no drastic percentage increase, for probably 3 to 4 years moving forward. So that allows us to have a good predictor in terms of overall impact on the operational budget. So if you look at the percent of increase, just say the teacher salaries line item, and salary line items are all through the line item budget, which you actually do have a copy of tonight. But it's like a 2-point-something percent increase, which is phenomenal, because while it's a cost, and it is a significant cost, we do not see those less predictable stepping lane changes. And that's because our teachers have invested in their own professional growth by continuing to be educated. So.
All right, thanks. Terrific.
I think I'm channeling Mary Beth Strickland here, though. That's kind of a double-edged sword, though, because
It
they
is.
are at the top end of the scale, so the percentage increase, even though it's only 2%, it's a big number.
Right.
But you know, we love our teachers, and that's just fine. But I kind of had a different perspective, right? When I saw that contractual obligations was over 700,000 and our increase is only 529,000, I mean, I looked at it as a good thing. But, you know, I see what you're saying. It is a little scary. This year it worked out a lot because of the special ed situation, but, you know, that kind of you could say you got lucky, but you make your own luck, too,
Mhm.
because of the programs put in place over the years. So, you know, I mean, kudos for that.
And we're human resource rich business, industry. That's what education is about, people and students. So.
I have a question. I don't understand, what's the expanding the preschool offerings and restricted tuition model? I may have missed that somewhere along the line.
So I think we talked about it last month. Maybe I think you weren't here when we actually talked about it. So I don't know, Clayton, if you want me to start, and you can.
Yeah, sure.
Or why don't you start?
Oh,
There you
sure.
go.
Well, we did some dipsticking of our preschool population, parents, and really the need was that they wanted more comprehensive, more structured programming, other than the 2, 3, 4-day model that we had prior. So we revamped it this year to what we currently have. That's a step in the right direction. The trend seems to be a push for full-day preschool, and that's really where we're headed in terms of offering for parents as an option, because of the fact that a lot of parents are working. Childcare is an issue to get kids out at 11:30, bring them back, or another session starting in the afternoon. The continuation of a full-day preschool model is really the interest that we've determined over the past 2 years.
Okay. And so as far as the budget is concerned, the tuition would offset any increased cost is the idea?
Yes, so one of the things too, I think we accomplished through those conversations, we had several different tuition models. I think there were about 6 or so. We flattened that to 2 to simplify, but moreover, we equalized the amount of minutes in the morning session and the afternoon session. There was a little disparity between the 2. So we just took the time, divided it in half, and put the lunch break in the middle. So that made sure that the morning session and the afternoon session were equal in terms of educational experiences for the students in the sessions. So what we were able to do is to increase the full-day tuition model. And because we expanded the number of sessions, we were able to take more students in. Working with also extended day to involve them in the conversation, to see whether this is good for them as well, because now we have parents who would enjoy some afternoon preschool, afternoon extended day hours that might not be now in their schedule. So they're working closely with us because we obviously want to make sure that we're not impacting them significantly as well, because they do provide a service for our students. It's important to note that the tuition preschool is supported by the operational budget, and we take in proportionately only about 12% of revenue for the overall cost. But what it has allowed us to do, and Rhoda's still in the audience, she's been advocating for a tutor teach, an addition of a teacher at preschool level to do early intervention, and to have that experience really be about the entry point for students who do not have that English is a second language. So, I would turn that over to Rhoda if she wanted to.
And what we see a lot at the preschool level is the challenge to be able to decide if a child actually has a disability or is it language acquisition, and it's language loss or the exposure to start learning another language. So it's a very difficult area, and it needs expertise and time to be able to look at the child in many different settings, both at school and in the home setting. So that is a very good area where we could not to misdiagnose a child when it's actually due to language development. So that is an area where we'd like to expand our expertise into.
I think what it demonstrates is when we're talking about one area, it involves a lot of conversations to make sure that if we're going to move in a direction, everybody needs to be at the table to make sure that any changes we implement are comprehensive and really engage everybody in that conversation. So it's been exciting.
I'd just like to add that 3 out of our 5 preschool classrooms are intensive, meaning that they include kids that are extremely complex with very comprehensive supports, and that is a great foundation for our kids to actually move forward within our system, getting the support early on, early intervention maintained throughout the elementary years. So it is a great program. If you ever have the chance to come by, I'd love to showcase it for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? We have a motion on the table to accept the recommended budget. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you.
December vote on the budget. Thank you.
Educational policy, approval of the Stone and Washington DC trips.
I think this is Principal LaVoy's area of expertise.
Yes, it is. Every year, I do come before the committee to ask for the approval of next year's trips. The planning for that needs to start immediately, so getting the approval of the committee for these out-of-state field trips is required by school committee policy. But like I shared in previous meetings, we had 2 successful trips in October of 2018 for Stone, November 2018 for DC. In conversations with both the Stone Environmental Center and School Tours of America, we are prepared to launch our planning with them for the upcoming year. I don't foresee any huge changes to prior itineraries or prior workarounds. The DC trip, tentatively, until it is approved, will be November 7th to November 10th, 2019, which will be very similar to this year's trip, which would then leave us with Monday, November 11th as our day off or day of recovery to prepare for school on Tuesday. But collectively, even in the aftermath of both of this year's trips, the collective sentiment around the school, and we had a lot of parents in today for our teacher appreciation luncheon, they were talking about both trips. Both 6th grade parents and 8th grade parents about the experience, thanking the teachers for going, just thinking, one parent in particular this was her 3rd child that went on the DC trip, and for whatever reason, this 3rd one decided to tell her everything that happened. And even, the first 2 gave her dribs and drabs of where they ate and says, "Mom, leave me alone." But this 8th grader went into detail about every aspect, and she was even more impressed and blown away and wanted to share that with me today. So, that just, that type of thing over the years. And in the documents I shared with you, it's amazing to look back at the DC trip started and has been consistent since 1974. And the Stone Environmental trip has been consistent since 1981. And these are long-standing institutions, and it's been great to have the community support of it, but as well as the school committee. So I'd like to request your approval for 2019.
I have a question. So are these are both totally funded by the kids, their families
Yes.
pay whatever portion?
That's correct. Mhm.
Okay, and it looked like, there's some scholarships or something for the stone? Are there also scholarships for DC?
There are,
Or-
yes.
Okay, I just wasn't clear
Yes,
about that. That's
through
good.
very generous donations from
Yeah.
parents over the years, we've been able to accumulate some funding for students to receive partial scholarships.
Okay.
None of the scholarships are full.
Okay.
Usually they're about 50% for each of the trips that we're able to support.
Okay.
Mhm.
And do you get the sense that any students don't end up going because of financial hardship?
From time to time,
Still,
yes.
or- yeah.
I mean, we really try to exhaust that. We've even had parents privately know of, hardship, and they have paid double to have their child go as well as another family's child go, just because of the community in which we live. So it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I do know it's happened on occasion. Some families have not requested a scholarship, for whatever reason, and have decided not to go on the trip, or have decided to go to DC in another way. So yes, there are those every year. I think I have a sense that the reason was financial. I'd say more times than not, the reasons are different, whether it's families have already been dozens of times, there's a wedding, there's a soccer tournament, there's other things that do get in the way. But I would say that's a majority of the students that don't go, it's because of those things versus the financial hardship.
Yeah, okay.
Do you think that it's, just following up on that point, do you think it's relatively common knowledge that scholarships are available if some
Yeah,
community understands that?
I would say for the most part, it is part of the initial communications and part of every communication up until the deadline. Every so often, I'll get a scholarship request that comes in well after, and sometimes we're not able to entertain those. This past year, I absorbed all the DC scholarship funding pretty quick. I didn't have to turn anyone away. I was worried that I would, but all that came in I was able to support, but I was worried because it was early. So if that is the trend, then I'll be keeping a closer eye on that as I go. If they should. I mean, it's a part of the initial communication rate and the initial bullet points. Scholarships are available upon request.
I'll back that up, having received all those
In
communications.
bold. In bold, all caps.
So I'll move that we approve the sixth grade field trip to Stone Environmental Center in Madison, New Hampshire for the 2019-2020 school year.
A second.
More discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Keep going, Roger.
That was
At DC too.
Oh, yes? What's that trip again? I'm not familiar with it.
You're not familiar with that one?
So I'll move that we approve the eighth grade trip to Washington DC for the 2019-2020 school year.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Very good.
I'll make a couple phone calls tomorrow. Thanks for the support.
Policy development, second readings,
So these are going to combine policy subcommittee for review before they're brought back to
okay.
vote here, Southborough School Committee.
Is there?
So no action.
Well, my understanding was that the policy committee wasn't able to meet for
Correct.
various reasons. Okay.
So
is
we'll
there-
be reviewing this in January as a Southborough policy subcommittee meeting, and then after that combined,
Okay.
we'll review it.
I have a question. Maybe I missed this. The I-20 class size, it's not on the list that was in the packet regarding the class sizes. Is the one change here, which is deleting the word 5, I guess for two reasons. I'm not sure what kind of where we are in this. Okay, because we have 6 criteria,
Mhm.
and because we've determined that it doesn't make a lot of sense to put a number there, because every time you add or delete a criteria, you're gonna have to worry about changing the number. So generally what's behind that?
So I think this policy was put in the packet to support the class size averages, and it hasn't been a policy that has been reviewed by policy subcommittee.
Okay, so it's sitting there
just-
with, it's marked up, but
Correct.
hasn't been,
Correct.
we're not ready for that yet.
It's not a policy that we've taken up as
Got
a
it.
policy subcommittee.
Okay.
And personnel items, we have the personnel reports. Straightforward. Communications, none at this time. Action on minutes from last month's meeting.
No changes of these, so I'll move we approve the minutes of the Southborough School Committee open meeting on Wednesday, November 14, 2018.
Second.
Moved by Roger, seconded by Jen. Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Those payrolls, I'm sure we have. Agenda items for next month.
We actually took the liberty, we collectively, administration with principal input, of adding some items that we haven't brought before the committee. With the budget voted, it opens up a window to have some presentations about things that we haven't had presentations about in the past. So we're excited to add these. I don't want to give too much away about them because they'll keep the mystery in place for those months.
Keep our excitement level
It will.
high.
You're going to want to come for these presentations. They're exciting. And so we may flex them a little bit between January and February, but here's some topics that we thought would be of interest. So they will be on an agenda coming your way in January or February. And I'm sure we'll have updates about solar and our progress, and also about financial advisory.
And the public hearing meeting?
February?
What did you say, it has to be 60 days? So is that good?
We generally do it in the month of April because that's what we've done traditionally, but we could certainly have the hearing in February or just leave it as we traditionally do, which is in our school committee meeting prior to town meeting, which would still be enough time. A week before town meeting, basically.
What did you say about 60 days? The public hearing has to be within 60
60
days
days
of
of
town
scheduled town meeting days.
Okay, yeah, with
Town
that.
meeting is March 23rd.
Or Saturday.
Right.
Another month or so we'll be there. Already within that.
Yeah, I guess the week in February, we still got plenty of time, so.
Right.
We'll just do that. I guess that brings us to audience sharing. I guess there's no audience sharing, so entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor? We are adjourned.